The year was 1855, and the world spun slowly in the quiet village of Oakhaven. Here, cobblestone streets snaked between sturdy wooden houses, and the air often smelled of wood smoke and freshly baked bread. In one such house lived a young girl named Ilara. She was a wisp of a child, with eyes the color of moss after a spring rain, and a mind that buzzed with questions like a beehive in summer. More than anything, Ilara loved to learn. She devoured stories told by her grandmother by the flickering firelight, traced letters in the dust with her finger, and listened with rapt attention whenever someone spoke of faraway lands or clever inventions. But for Ilara, learning from books and teachers was a dream as distant as the moon. Her days were filled with chores. From the moment the sun peeked over the eastern hills, Ilara was busy. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. She helped her mother mend clothes, swept the hearth, fetched water from the well, and cared for her younger siblings. There were always baskets to weave, vegetables to tend in the small garden, and eggs to gather from the clucking hens. Her family needed her, and in those days, family duties came before everything else, especially for a girl. The village schoolhouse, a small stone building with a tall, narrow window, stood just a few streets away, a constant reminder of what she was missing. Each morning, as Ilara carried her water buckets, she would catch a glimpse of the school. Her heart would ache with a quiet longing. She imagined children inside, their heads bent over slates, their voices rising in unison as they recited their lessons. She pictured a kind teacher, with spectacles perched on her nose, guiding them through the mysteries of numbers and words. Sometimes she would pause, balancing the heavy buckets, just to listen. But the school was always silent. No childish laughter spilled from its open door. No rhythmic chanting of the alphabet drifted on the breeze. It was as still as a forgotten tomb. Ilara wondered about it often. Why was the school so quiet? Had the children gone on a long holiday? Was the teacher ill? She knew the village had many children, yet none seemed to attend the school. It was a puzzle that tugged at her curious mind, a mystery hidden in plain sight, right in the heart of Oakhaven. Every day, the empty silence of the schoolhouse only deepened her own sense of loneliness and her quiet yearning for knowledge. The puzzle of the quiet schoolhouse continued to niggle at Ilara. Every day, without fail, she would find herself glancing its way. It wasn't just silent. It felt different. Other buildings in Oakhaven had the hum of life, a blacksmith's hammer clanging, women gossiping by the well, farmers calling to their animals. But the schoolhouse, even in the middle of a sunny Tuesday when children should have been reciting their ABCs, remained eerily still. Its windows, usually so clear, sometimes seemed to shimmer, as if looking through them was like looking through heat rising from a summer road. Ilara knew the normal hours for school. Her grandmother had spoken of them often, of the morning lessons and the afternoon studies. Yet, when the village clock chimed 8 in the morning, or when it tolled 1 after the midday meal, the schoolhouse stayed resolutely empty. No children hurried through its wooden door, no books were carried, no excited chatter broke the quiet air. It wasn't just a few days, it was weeks, then months. The grass around the schoolhouse grew a little wilder than in other places, and sometimes a forgotten leaf would cling to the door for days, undisturbed. Once, Ilara had dared to walk closer, her little heart thumping like a bird's wing against her ribs. She peered through a window, shading her eyes with a small hand. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the grimy glass. Inside, she saw rows of empty wooden desks, each with a small inkwell, and a large blackboard at the front, wiped clean. There was no sign of life, no discarded chalk, no crumpled paper. It looked as if a school was ready to begin, but no one had ever arrived. "It's just an old building, Ilara," her mother would say, noticing her gaze. "No teacher has come to Oakhaven for many years. Our children learn what they need at home." But Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Why was it still called the schoolhouse, if no one ever went there? Why did it stand ready, but abandoned? She imagined what it would be like to sit at one of those desks, to hold a piece of chalk, to learn. The thought made her both sad and even more curious. The schoolhouse was a quiet sentinel, guarding a secret only it knew, and Ilara, with her yearning heart, felt drawn to unravel it. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ilara was on her way to collect herbs from the edge of the woods. Her basket swung lightly in her hand, but her gaze, as usual, drifted towards the schoolhouse. The sun was low in the sky, casting long, lazy shadows from the trees. As she drew nearer, something caught her eye. It wasn't the usual dust motes dancing in the window, or the faint shimmer she sometimes saw. This was different. At one of the tall, narrow windows, she saw a shape. It was faint, like a wisp of smoke, but clearly the outline of a child. Ilara stopped dead in her tracks, her basket nearly tumbling from her hand. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, and looked again. Yes, it was still there. A small, indistinct figure, like a drawing made with moonlight, seemed to be sitting at one of the empty desks inside. It moved slightly, a gentle sway, as if listening intently. Ilara's heart began to beat a quick, excited rhythm. She slowly, carefully, took a step closer, then another. She noticed more. At another window she saw a second shape, and then a third. These were not solid children, not like the ones she saw playing in the village square. These figures were translucent, like faint memories or reflections on water. They shimmered, almost flickering, in the weak afternoon light. They moved with a quiet grace, their hands sometimes lifting as if to write, or their heads tilting as if to speak. They were outlines, mere suggestions of children. One had what looked like 2 pigtails, another a cap. Their forms were clear enough to tell they were young, perhaps Ilara's age, or a little older. Their movements were soft, fluid, without the sharp edges of real bodies. They were like shadows, but not the dark, solid shadows cast by the sun. These shadows seemed to glow with a faint inner light, a soft, silvery gleam that made them stand out against the dimness inside the school. Ilara felt a thrill, a mix of wonder and a little fear, prickle her skin. She had never seen anything like it. The schoolhouse wasn't empty after all. But who were these shimmering children? They weren't ghosts, not in the scary way her grandmother sometimes spoke of them. These figures seemed peaceful, engaged, almost learning. The mystery of the quiet schoolhouse had just deepened, twisting into something far more wondrous and strange than she could have ever imagined. She stood frozen, watching the silent, shimmering dance of the shadow children. The shimmering figures held Ilara spellbound. Her fear slowly gave way to a powerful urge to understand. She crept closer, her worn shoes making no sound on the packed earth. Her breath hitched in her throat as she peered through the grimy glass of the window, pressing her nose against the cool pane. Now, with her face almost touching the window, she could see them even more clearly. They were undeniably children, though made of light and shadow. Their faint forms sat upright at the wooden desks, each one still and attentive. One shadowy boy, with what looked like a ruffled collar, seemed to be tracing something in the air with a translucent finger. A girl with wispy braids tilted her head, as if listening intently to a soft voice. Ilara could even make out the faint, shimmering outlines of small books open on their desks, pages turning as if by an invisible breeze. Her gaze then drifted to the front of the room. There, standing beside the large, clean blackboard, was another figure. This one was taller, more defined, though still shimmering like heat haze. It was the outline of an old woman, with what appeared to be a high-collared dress and a gentle bun of hair. Her shadowy hand was raised, pointing to the blackboard, where faint, glowing letters seemed to appear and disappear. This was a teacher, a shadowy teacher, guiding her class of shadow children. A wave of understanding washed over Ilara. This wasn't just an empty building. It was a school, a special school, attended by children who were not quite real. They were made of light and air, like dreams given form. They moved with a silent grace, their presence filling the room with a gentle, humming energy that Ilara could almost feel, even though she couldn't hear a sound. She watched, mesmerized, as the shadowy teacher's hand moved, and the glowing letters on the blackboard changed. The shadow children would lean forward, or make a soft, almost imperceptible nod. It was a lesson in progress, a class unfolding in a world just beyond her own. The loneliness that usually clung to Ilara began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of wonder. She wasn't just observing a mystery, she was witnessing something truly magical, a secret school where only shadows attended, and where learning seemed to glow with its own soft light. As Ilara watched the shadowy class, a faint sound, like the rustle of dry leaves, brushed past her ears. She strained to hear, holding her breath. It was almost imperceptible, a whisper carried on a breeze that wasn't there. Then she heard it again, a soft, murmuring sound, like many tiny voices speaking at once, but far away. It was too soft to make out words clearly, but it was undeniably the sound of lessons. A moment later, a distinct, gentle voice, like the chime of a small bell, seemed to float from inside the schoolhouse. It was the shadowy teacher's voice, though it too was faint, as if speaking from behind a thick curtain. "And so, children," the voice seemed to say, "the harvest moon brings not just warmth, but wisdom." The words were like fragments of a dream, barely there, yet clear enough for Ilara to grasp their meaning. She then heard a soft chorus of what sounded like very quiet giggles, followed by the rustle of pages. It was like listening to a bustling classroom from very far away, through many layers of silence. Ilara realized with a jolt that these were the actual sounds of the school, muted and magical, meant only for those who truly listened. A profound thought bloomed in Ilara's mind. These weren't just random shadows. These were children. Children like her, perhaps, who loved learning but for some reason couldn't attend a regular school. They were the forgotten children, the unseen ones, whose bodies might be busy with chores or hidden away by shyness or illness, but whose spirits burned bright with a desire to learn. This must be a special school, a magical school, where their yearning for knowledge allowed their very essence, their shadows, to gather and learn. The realization brought a fresh wave of wonder, mixed with a deep sense of connection. Ilara had always felt unseen, her own thirst for learning hidden by her daily tasks. Now, she saw others just like her, or rather, the shimmering echoes of others like her. The schoolhouse, which had once felt so empty and cold, now pulsed with a gentle, secret warmth. It was a haven for spirits hungry for knowledge, a place where the love of learning was so strong it could call forth classrooms made of light and whispers. Ilara felt a powerful pull, a deep yearning to be part of this magical, unseen world. The faint whispers and the soft bell-like voice of the shadowy teacher filled Ilara with a warmth she rarely felt. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, a feeling that settled in her chest like a gentle, glowing ember. She felt a strange, undeniable pull towards the shimmering classroom, as if an invisible thread connected her spirit to theirs. All her life, Ilara had been surrounded by her family, yet often felt alone in her love for learning. While her siblings were content with games and chores, her mind always wandered to stories, numbers, and the wonders of the world beyond Oakhaven. Here, watching the silent, luminous students, she recognized a shared spirit. These shadow children, too, were hungry for knowledge, their very forms born from that deep desire. It was a feeling of belonging she had never experienced. Even though she was outside, a solid girl made of flesh and bone, and they were inside, made of light and shadow, she felt more connected to them than to many of the living children in the village. Their quiet intensity, their silent focus on the teacher's lessons, mirrored her own secret dreams. This school, this magical, hidden school, felt like the home her searching mind had always yearned for. A smile, soft and unbidden, touched Ilara's lips. It was a smile of pure wonder and a quiet joy. She imagined sitting among them, her own shadow joining their luminous forms, her own spirit drinking in the wisdom from the shadowy teacher. The thought was a sweet whisper in her mind, a promise of a place where she would truly fit in. She unconsciously took another step towards the schoolhouse door, her hand reaching out as if to grasp something invisible. The longing was intense, a powerful urge to cross the threshold and become one of them, to be part of their quiet, magical world of learning. Her heart swelled with hope, a feeling that had been a stranger to her for so long. She longed to join the school where the unseen learned, where her own yearning for knowledge might finally find its place. This was more than a mystery now. It was an invitation, a silent call to a hidden world that felt profoundly right. The longing to be part of the shimmering classroom became too strong to resist. With her heart fluttering, Ilara walked slowly towards the heavy wooden door of the schoolhouse. It looked solid enough, with its rusted iron handle and weathered planks. She reached out her hand, a small, tentative gesture, expecting to feel the rough wood beneath her fingertips. But her fingers met nothing. Instead of the solid resistance of wood, her hand passed right through the door, as if it were made of mist. Ilara gasped, a little sound of disbelief escaping her lips. She pulled her hand back quickly, staring at it, then at the door. Had she imagined it? She pressed her palm against the surface again, more firmly this time. Again, her hand slipped through, meeting no obstacle, feeling only the cool, empty air beyond. It was as if the door, which looked so real, wasn't truly there for her. She tried the door handle, twisting it. Her fingers closed around the cold metal, but when she pulled, it didn't budge. It felt solid to her touch, yet her body couldn't interact with it in the way it should. It was a door, and yet it wasn't. It was a barrier, but one that seemed to allow only certain kinds of entry. A pang of disappointment, sharp and sudden, pierced through Ilara's hopeful heart. She had felt so close, so connected to the shadowy students. Now, it was clear she was an outsider, a solid girl in a world of spectral learning. The magical school, which had seemed to invite her with its whispers and shimmering lights, now presented an impassable, invisible wall. She leaned her head against the doorframe, feeling the cold, hard stone. Her eyes welled up a little with frustrated tears. She could see them, hear them faintly, feel their presence, but she couldn't join them. It was like pressing her face against a window, seeing a warm, inviting fire, but feeling only the biting cold. The sense of belonging she had felt moments before now seemed cruel, a teasing illusion. She was on one side of a veil, and the shadow children were on the other, just out of reach. Ilara stood, disheartened, her hand still tingling from passing through the door. The joy she had felt moments ago had deflated, leaving a hollow ache. She looked up at the window again, her eyes still a little blurry with unshed tears. The shadow children were still there, still engaged in their silent lesson, seemingly unaware of her struggle. But then, the shadowy teacher, the kindly old woman with the high-collared dress, turned her head. Her luminous form, usually focused on the blackboard, slowly pivoted. It was as if she had sensed Ilara's presence, or perhaps her disappointment. Her shimmering gaze, though without true eyes, seemed to rest gently on Ilara. A feeling of warmth, like sun on her skin, spread through Ilara's chest. The teacher then moved with a grace that was both fluid and silent. She glided from the front of the classroom, her shadowy form passing between the desks without disturbing the students. The other shadow children remained fixed in their positions, their attention still on the faint glowing letters. The teacher, however, was clearly making her way towards the window where Ilara stood. As she approached, her shimmering outline seemed to grow a little brighter, a little more distinct. Ilara watched, mesmerized, as the teacher reached the window. Her face, a soft, indistinct glow, seemed to hold an expression of gentle understanding. A small, almost imperceptible smile seemed to form on her translucent lips. She paused just inside the glass, her shimmering form perfectly framed by the window pane. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening to a question Ilara hadn't asked, or perhaps sensing the unspoken longing in the girl's heart. Ilara felt a strange sense of being truly seen, not just observed, but understood by this ethereal being. The disappointment that had clouded her earlier feelings began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and a profound curiosity about what the shadowy teacher might do or say. The magic of the school, it seemed, was not entirely closed off to her after all. The shadowy teacher stood before Ilara, a shimmering beacon of gentle wisdom. A voice, clear now but still soft, like wind chimes on a still morning, spoke not from the air, but directly into Ilara's mind, a warmth spreading through her thoughts. "Do not be disheartened, little one," the teacher's voice resonated, calming Ilara's worried heart. "The door is not meant for all to pass through, not in the way you understand." Ilara looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. "But I want to learn," she whispered, her own voice sounding rough and loud after the teacher's gentle tone. "I want to be in there with them." A soft, silvery light seemed to emanate from the teacher, making her appear even more kindly. "I know, child. I feel your yearning, as I feel the yearning of all my students." She paused, her shimmering head tilting slightly. "This is a special school, Ilara. It is not for bodies, but for spirits. Only those whose spirits truly ache for knowledge, those who are bound by earthly duties or troubles, and thus cannot attend a regular school, can find their way here. Bound elsewhere, Ilara repeated softly, a new understanding dawning. She thought of her endless chores, her family's need for her hands and time. That was her binding. Yes, the teacher confirmed, her voice filled with gentle knowing. Many children in this village, and in villages far beyond, have minds that hunger for books, for numbers, for stories, but their feet cannot carry them to a schoolhouse. Their hands must work, their bodies must rest, or their circumstances keep them hidden. But their spirits are free to seek knowledge. The teacher's shimmering hand, almost translucent, gestured towards the classroom behind her. These are the spirits of those forgotten children, the unseen ones, whose longing for learning is so great that it draws their essence here. They are the shadows of their living selves, learning in a place built just for them, a place where their true selves can thrive. Ilara finally understood. The shimmering forms weren't ghosts in the scary stories, but manifestations of pure desire for education. This was a secret, magical haven for the minds that could not be held back, even if their bodies were. And she, with her own deep longing, had found it. Ilara gazed at the shadowy teacher, her mind buzzing with the new understanding. She looked at her own solid hands, then back at the shimmering forms within the school. "But I'm not a shadow," she said, her voice still small. "I'm real. My body is here." The teacher's soft, bell-like voice, still echoing in Ilara's mind, offered a comforting reply. "You are indeed real, dear Ilara. But your spirit, your true self, longs for knowledge with such strength that it vibrates, shines, and reaches out. That deep, powerful desire is what has drawn you here, to this very window." A warmth spread through Ilara, starting from her chest and tingling to her fingertips. "My desire?" she asked, a spark of hope flickering within her. "Yes, your longing," the teacher confirmed. "For many years, your spirit has watched this school, curious and yearning. While your body is needed elsewhere, tending to your family and duties, your mind has always sought answers. That pure, unwavering hunger to learn has made your spirit visible to us. It has allowed a part of you to cross the veil, to stand at the edge of our classroom." The teacher's shimmering form seemed to glow brighter as she spoke, her gentle understanding wrapping around Ilara like a warm blanket. "Even though your physical body cannot pass through our door, your spirit has already found its way to our lessons. You are not merely observing, Ilara. You are already a part of this place, in spirit." Ilara thought of all the times she had secretly read by candlelight, or carefully traced letters in the dirt with a stick, or simply listened intently to her grandmother's tales. No one had ever truly understood how much she craved knowledge, how much it felt like a part of her very being. But this shadowy teacher, this wise and kind being, saw it all. She saw the true Ilara, the girl whose spirit shone with a love for learning. It was an incredible realization. Her inability to attend school hadn't been a weakness or a barrier, but in a strange, magical way, it had been her path to this secret place. Her very yearning had opened a door, not for her body, but for her spirit. She was not an outsider, not entirely. Her spirit was already visiting, learning, and finding a home among the shadows. A wave of quiet joy washed over Ilara. To know that her yearning heart had made her visible, had opened this magical possibility, was more than she could have hoped for. Then, "Can I stay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly with eagerness. "Can I learn too?" The shadowy teacher's form seemed to shimmer with approval, and her gentle voice echoed in Ilara's mind. "Indeed, dear Ilara, your spirit is already so luminous with the desire for knowledge that it is nearly as translucent as those who sit within. You are welcome here, in your own way." With a soft, welcoming gesture of her shimmering hand, the teacher pointed to a spot just outside the window, where a patch of grass grew thick and green. "Sit there, little one. Sit where you are comfortable. Listen with your heart and your mind, and you shall hear and learn as clearly as if you sat within these very walls." Ilara's face broke into a wide, radiant smile. She quickly moved from the doorway to the designated spot, settling herself down on the cool grass beneath the window. From this new vantage point, she could still see the shadowy children at their desks, their faint forms focused intently. The teacher, too, was still visible, her shimmering presence radiating warmth and wisdom. As Ilara sat, she noticed something remarkable. The faint whispers and the teacher's gentle voice became clearer, as if the air itself was now carrying the sounds directly to her. She heard lessons about the changing seasons, about the constellations that danced across the night sky, and about the long-ago tales of the village. The shadow children within seemed to turn their pages in perfect unison with the teacher's words, and Ilara felt a deep connection to their silent, collective learning. It was as if a new sense had awakened within her, allowing her to perceive the world of the shadow school with greater clarity. She was not physically inside, but she was no longer truly outside either. She was at the threshold, a living bridge between the solid world and the realm of shimmering spirits, her own spirit eager to drink from the well of knowledge. The feeling of belonging, which had briefly faded, now returned stronger than ever, filling her with a quiet, profound happiness. She had found her school, a magical place where her love for learning could finally take flight. And so, a new rhythm entered Ilara's life. Every day, after her morning chores were done, and before her family might miss her, she would slip away to the schoolhouse. She carried no books, no slate, just her eager mind and open heart. She would settle onto her patch of grass beneath the window, a secret student in a secret school. For weeks, this became her treasured routine. The shadow school operated with quiet consistency. The shadowy teacher would stand at the front, her gentle voice, like the softest melody, filling Ilara's mind with knowledge. Ilara learned about the world far beyond Oakhaven, stories of ancient kings and queens, and bustling cities she could only imagine. She learned about numbers, how they danced and combined to solve tricky problems, and how they could measure the stars. She learned about the history of their own quiet village, tales of its founding and the people who had lived there long ago. The lessons were never rushed, always patient. The shadow children within the school seemed to absorb the knowledge with a silent grace, their shimmering forms occasionally nodding or shifting slightly. Ilara, sitting outside, found that if she closed her eyes, the whispers became even clearer, as if the knowledge was flowing directly into her thoughts. She would repeat new words to herself under her breath, or try to solve math problems by drawing in the dirt with a stick, then look up to see if the shadowy children had also understood. No one in the village ever noticed Ilara's daily trips. The schoolhouse remained outwardly silent and empty to all others. They saw only a neglected building, but Ilara saw a vibrant, magical classroom. She was learning more than she had ever dreamed possible. The world began to open up for her, each lesson a new window into understanding. The quiet whispers of the shadow school filled the empty spaces in her mind and heart, turning her loneliness into a rich, secret joy. She was a student, finally, and the knowledge she gained was a treasure no one could take away. As weeks turned into a season, Ilara's secret studies began to change her in wonderful ways. Her days, once a blur of endless chores, now sparkled with a hidden purpose. Even the mundane tasks felt lighter. While she scrubbed pots, her mind might be busy recalling a history lesson about ancient lands. As she collected eggs, she might be counting them in a new, clever way the shadowy teacher had taught. Her mind, which had always been quick, now felt even sharper. She noticed more details in the world around her, connected ideas faster, and understood things that had once seemed complicated. Her grandmother, a wise old woman, sometimes remarked, "Ilara, your eyes have a new light in them, and your answers are quicker than ever. What tales have you been weaving in your head, child?" Ilara would simply smile, a secret warmth blossoming in her heart, knowing the real magic behind her newfound cleverness. But the biggest change wasn't just in her mind. It was in her heart. The deep loneliness that had been a constant companion began to fade. Even though the shadow children were unseen by others, and their companionship was silent, Ilara felt profoundly connected to them. She knew they were there, sharing her love for learning, a silent chorus of eager minds. Their presence, though ethereal, filled the void in her heart. She no longer felt like the only one in the village who dreamed of books and lessons. She had companions, unseen friends who understood her quiet passion. The schoolhouse, once a symbol of what she lacked, now represented a secret treasure, a place of belonging. This unseen companionship made her feel less alone in the bustling, busy world of Oakhaven. Ilara found herself humming softly as she worked, her step lighter, her spirits brighter. The world, which had sometimes felt dull and demanding, now seemed full of hidden wonders, just waiting for her to discover them. The shadow school had not only filled her mind with knowledge, but had also filled her heart with a quiet joy and the comforting warmth of unseen friends. While Ilara's world was being secretly transformed, the rest of Oakhaven continued its familiar routines, completely unaware of the quiet magic happening at the old schoolhouse. The other children of the village, boisterous and busy, went about their days as they always had. The boys spent their mornings helping their fathers in the fields or learning trades in the blacksmith's forge and carpenter's shop. In the afternoons, their shouts and laughter would echo through the village as they played games of tag or rolled hoops down the dusty lanes. The girls, like Ilara, were often found beside their mothers, learning to spin wool, churn butter, or care for younger siblings. Their own games involved dolls made of rags or skipping ropes woven from old twine. To them, the schoolhouse was just that, an old house. It stood silent and empty, a forgotten building on the edge of their bustling lives. They had been told there was no teacher, no lessons, and so they never gave it a second thought. Its dusty windows reflected only the sky and trees, never hinting at the shimmering forms within. They were too busy with their tangible world, their solid games, and their clear, loud conversations, to notice anything as subtle as a school of shadows. And they certainly never noticed Ilara. She was just another girl, small and quiet, always on her way to or from a chore. When she slipped away to her spot beneath the schoolhouse window, she became as invisible to them as the shadow children themselves. Her presence there, sitting on the grass, listening to unheard whispers, was too gentle, too still, to catch their eye. They were looking for action, for noise, for something solid to grasp. The world of the Shadow School existed in a space between worlds, a place only truly visible to those whose spirits were aligned with its purpose. The villagers, even the children, simply saw the physical building, a shell devoid of life. They couldn't perceive the luminous forms, hear the gentle bell-like voice of the teacher, or feel the quiet hum of learning that filled the air for Ilara. It was her secret, her special gift, and it remained perfectly safe from the bustling, unseeing eyes of Oakhaven. One late afternoon, as the sun began its descent, and Ilara was about to gather her herbs, a strange sound broke the usual quiet of the schoolhouse area. It wasn't the soft whispers of the Shadow School, but the distinct rattle of a carriage on the cobblestones. This was unusual. Few travelers passed through Oakhaven, and even fewer stopped at the neglected school. Ilara, hidden by a thick elderberry bush near her usual learning spot, watched with wide, curious eyes. A small, sturdy carriage, pulled by a tired-looking horse, rumbled to a halt right in front of the schoolhouse door. A woman stepped out. She wasn't shadowy or shimmering, but very real, dressed in a practical dark blue traveling dress, with a neat bonnet tied under her chin. She carried a leather satchel and a roll of papers tied with string. This woman had a bright, determined look in her eyes, and a kind smile that seemed to light up her face even from a distance. She looked around the quiet village, her gaze eventually settling on the schoolhouse. Ilara noticed her take a deep, hopeful breath. The woman walked directly to the schoolhouse door, the same door Ilara had tried to pass through. She didn't hesitate. She produced a large, old-fashioned key from her satchel, and with a satisfying click and creak, she unlocked the door. The sound echoed surprisingly loudly in the still afternoon air. She pushed the door open, revealing the dusty interior Ilara knew so well. But this time, it was different. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating the empty desks, and for the first time in years, the schoolhouse felt truly open. The woman stepped inside, placing her satchel on the teacher's desk. She turned and looked out, as if expecting someone. Ilara realized with a jolt that this was a new teacher, a real teacher, arriving to finally open the village school. The one her mother had said would never come. This woman wasn't for the shadows. She was for the living children of Oakhaven. A strange mix of excitement and a little sadness fluttered in Ilara's chest. Her secret school might still be there, but now the real world was catching up. The new teacher, Miss Albright, stepped inside the schoolhouse, a small frown creasing her brow. She looked around at the dusty, empty desks, the clean blackboard, and the quiet air. How strange, she murmured to herself, her voice a soft ripple in the silence. The village elders had told her the school had been empty for years, that no lessons had been taught, yet the air inside felt different. It wasn't cold or stale, as an unused building should be. Instead, a peculiar warmth seemed to linger, a gentle, almost shimmering heat that made the hair on her arms tingle. It was a feeling she couldn't quite place, but it reminded her of a sunny afternoon spent reading a favorite book, or the quiet glow of a hearth on a winter's evening. It was a comforting, familiar sensation, yet utterly out of place in a long-abandoned room. Miss Albright ran her hand over a desktop. It was dusty, yes, but beneath the dust, she felt a faint vibration, like the echo of many busy hands and focused minds. She walked to the blackboard, where the shadowy teacher had pointed with her luminous hand only moments before. Miss Albright saw no glowing letters, of course, but she felt a faint whisper of excitement in the air, as if a wonderful lesson had just concluded. She stood at the front of the room, turning slowly, taking in every detail. "It feels as though children were just here," she mused aloud, a puzzled smile touching her lips, "as if they simply vanished into thin air, leaving their eager minds behind." She shook her head gently. "Perhaps it's just my imagination, wishing for eager students where there are none yet." But the feeling persisted. It was a tangible presence, a light, joyful hum that filled the empty space, making the room feel ready, alive, and even welcoming. It was the residue of countless lessons, of bright spirits yearning and learning. Miss Albright, though she couldn't see the shimmering forms or hear the quiet whispers, could feel the magic that Ilara had been part of for weeks. It was the warmth of learning, the faint echo of the shadow school, ready to awaken the space for new, living students. She took another deep breath, a feeling of hope mixing with her confusion. This schoolhouse felt special, even before her first student arrived. The next morning, a buzz of excitement, quite unlike the usual quiet of Oakhaven, filled the air. Ilara, peeking from behind her window, saw villagers gathering near the schoolhouse. Miss Albright stood on the small porch, a vibrant figure against the old stone. She held a bell, not a shimmering, silent one, but a real brass bell that gleamed in the morning sun. With a strong, clear ring, Miss Albright announced, "Good morning, Oakhaven. I am Miss Albright, and I have come to open your school." Her voice carried across the village green, a joyful sound that promised new beginnings. Children, who had been curious but hesitant, now started to gather, their parents urging them forward. Ilara watched from her usual spot, hidden by the elderberry bush. She saw the other village children, her age and younger, shuffle shyly towards the open schoolhouse door. Some carried small, worn books, others clutched slates. It was a sight she had only dreamed of, a real school, open and ready for learning. Miss Albright smiled warmly at the growing crowd. "The schoolhouse has been quiet for too long," she said, her voice full of enthusiasm, "but no longer. From this day forward, it will be a place of learning for every child in Oakhaven. All are welcome. Come, let us fill these rooms with new stories, new numbers, and new songs." As she spoke, the sun seemed to hit the schoolhouse windows just right, and for a fleeting moment, Ilara thought she saw a faint shimmer within, a ripple of light that might have been the last lingering trace of the shadow children. It was as if the invisible school was gently stepping aside, making way for the solid one. Ilara's heart swelled. This was it, the chance she had always longed for, the opportunity to sit at a real desk, to hold a real book, to learn with other living children. Her secret lessons with the shadows had prepared her, sharpened her mind, and filled her with courage. Now, the physical school was finally opening its doors, not just to the village, but, she hoped, to her too. As Miss Albright's clear voice invited all children to the newly opened school, a profound realization settled over Ilara. This wasn't just a happy coincidence. It felt like a culmination, a natural next step in the magic she had witnessed. The shadow school hadn't just been a place for her spirit to learn. It had been a force, quietly preparing the way for this very moment. She remembered the shadowy teacher's words. "Your spirit is already so luminous with the desire for knowledge that it is nearly as translucent as those who sit within." Ilara now understood that the collective yearning of all the shadow children, their silent lessons and glowing presence, had imbued the old schoolhouse with such a powerful hunger for learning that it had drawn a real teacher to Oakhaven. The warmth Miss Albright felt, the feeling of children having just been there, was the lingering magic of the shadow school, awakening the physical space. The school had been dormant, a forgotten shell, but the spirits of the unseen children, guided by their wise, shadowy teacher, had kept the flame of learning alive within its walls. They had polished the air with their whispers, warmed the desks with their shimmering forms, and filled the blackboard with their glowing knowledge. They had made the schoolhouse ready, not just for themselves, but for the living children who would now fill its seats. Ilara felt a rush of gratitude. The shadow school had not only given her the gift of knowledge, but had also paved the way for her to join a real school. It was as if her unseen teachers had been preparing the stage, ensuring that when the time was right, the physical school would be vibrant and welcoming. Her secret lessons hadn't been a substitute for real school. They had been the very magic that brought real school to her. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and a deep, quiet reverence for the magic she had been part of. This was her chance, her true chance. And it was all thanks to the shimmering, silent school where only shadows had attended. The time for secret learning was drawing to a close, and a new chapter, bright and full of possibility, was about to begin. With the real school opening, Ilara knew her time as a secret student of the shadows was drawing to a close. She cast her gaze towards the window, where she could still, faintly, perceive the shimmering forms of her unseen classmates and the gentle, luminous figure of the shadowy teacher. The sun was now fully up, and their forms seemed a little fainter than usual, as if ready to retreat. A pang of bitter-sweet emotion fluttered in Ilara's chest. She would miss her quiet hours on the grass, the soft whispers that filled her mind, and the comforting sense of belonging among the unseen. These shadowy friends had been her first true companions in learning, opening up a world she thought was forever closed to her. She closed her eyes for a moment, sending a silent message of thanks. "Thank you," she thought, directing her gratitude to the shadowy teacher and all the luminous students. "Thank you for the stories, for the numbers, for the history. Thank you for showing me that learning can always find a way. Thank you for making me feel seen." When she opened her eyes, she looked specifically at the shadowy teacher, who seemed to nod almost imperceptibly. A last, gentle wave of warmth reaching Ilara's heart. It was a goodbye, unspoken but deeply felt. The shadow children, too, seemed to shimmer softly, like a final, silent chorus of farewell. Their lessons were complete, their purpose fulfilled. The magic they had woven into the schoolhouse had bloomed into a tangible reality. Ilara felt a sense of closure, but also immense joy. She wasn't leaving her friends behind entirely. Their lessons and their quiet companionship would always be a part of her, a hidden strength. She carried their wisdom in her mind and their courage in her heart. She stood up, brushing the grass from her dress. The time for dreaming of school was over. The time for attending it had truly begun. With her silent farewell given, Ilara took a deep breath, her heart full of a new kind of courage. The familiar ache of longing was gone, replaced by a quiet strength. She smoothed her simple dress, adjusted the ribbon in her hair, and stepped out from behind the elderberry bush. The other children, still hesitant, milled around the schoolhouse door, pushed forward by their parents. Miss Albright stood on the porch, a welcoming smile on her face. Ilara walked purposefully towards her, her head held a little higher than usual. Her steps were light, not with the hurriedness of chores, but with the eagerness of a student ready to learn. Miss Albright noticed her immediately. Her kind eyes, which had been scanning the crowd, settled on Ilara. A flicker of recognition, perhaps from the unique light in Ilara's own eyes, seemed to pass between them. "Good morning, Miss Albright," Ilara said, her voice clear and steady. "I would like to enroll in your school, please." Miss Albright's smile widened. "Welcome, child. And what is your name?" "Ilara," she replied, feeling a flush of pride. "Ilara of Oakhaven." As Miss Albright wrote Ilara's name on a fresh piece of parchment, Ilara felt a peculiar blend of old and new. She was a living girl, standing on solid ground, ready to learn in a real school. Yet within her, she carried the whispers of the shadows, the gentle lessons of the unseen teacher, and the silent companionship of her shimmering friends. Her mind was already filled with stories of distant lands and the magic of numbers, thanks to her secret education. She was the first to step across the threshold of the reopened school, her small hand clutching a borrowed slate. As she took a seat at one of the wooden desks, the same desks she had watched the shadow children sit at, she felt a profound sense of rightness. The warmth Miss Albright had felt in the room was now a vibrant, living energy, thanks to the children filling the space. Ilara knew, with a certainty that hummed in her heart, that the lessons of the shadows had not ended. They had simply transformed, becoming a hidden wellspring of knowledge and confidence that would guide her through every new day in this real, wonderful school.